Hello, everyone. In the Nordic countries, there are laws which protect women in their homes, in the workplace, in public areas. You are not allowed to expose us to violence. You are not allowed to expose us to sexual harassment. You are not allowed to expose us to racism. And you are not allowed to rape us. These laws can lose their power for a very small amount when it comes to buying a woman in prostitution. Then violence is no longer violence, sexual harassment is no longer sexual harassment, and racism is no longer racism. And rape is no longer rape, but only a part of the business of prostitution. To maintain that particular view that a group of society's women should be at service to fulfill men's sexual needs, it keeps a group of women in a situation where they are no longer protected by national or international laws regarding basic human rights. The Icelandic anthropologist Gisli Atlason, who conducted a study why Danish men buy prostitution, believes that the way men and women's sexuality is defined depends on the amount of prostitution that takes place in each country, and that gender equality depends on this. I have for more than 40 years worked as a social worker among women in all forms of prostitution that exist, and I have to agree with him. Men can, for a small amount of money, buy the right to use a woman to live out every sexual fantasy. He knows what he can get women to do for a small amount of money, and he is not at work or back at home working for equality between men and women. In autumn 2012, the Danish government decided, despite of earlier promises, not to follow the Nordic countries and introduce a law criminalizing the purchase of sexual service. The Danish government has hereby accepted that men should have the continuous right to sexual access to other people's bodies against payment. Why do we accept it happens? To legitimize and create distance, we call them by names. The woman is no longer a woman, but becomes whore, slut, the sexual immoral. We call her the prostitute as if it was genetic and not an act committed by women that for many reasons could not see other options. Sweden, Norway, and Iceland had no doubt about the unequal power relations and look at prostitution as violence against women. All three countries have long criminalized the right to buy sexual access to other people's bodies. Finland has taken the first step and banned the purchase of victims of trafficking, while, as in Denmark, with a clear conscience and legality, making it possible to continue to buy national women for prostitution. A Danish writer, O. Poulsen, who had experience from prostitution from brothels, escort, defined prostitution as follows. Being a prostitution is being a body that can be bent in joints, legs spread out, open your mouth and receive the customer's imagination. You have to smile and create the illusion the man expects. The illusion that you love sex. You love having sex with many men every single day. Just the macho porno-like way that many men want after seeing how women in porn movies will take it all. Out of a population of about 5.5 million in Denmark, 1.5% of the Danish men are buying prostitution. The American Siddharth Kara, who has written the book Sex Trafficking Inside the Business of Modern Slavery, has made a calculation of how long a man has to work to get money to buy a woman for prostitution. An Indian has to work 2.5 hours. An Italian must work 2.2 hours. An American must work 1.4 hours, it means 75 minutes. A Danish man has to work even less. The many foreign women, which represent more than 50% of all prostitution in Denmark, keeps prices for prostitution at such a low level. Then on the street you can buy a blowjob for 10 euro and a sexual intercourse for 13 to 25 euros, which even a schoolboy can afford. There are people who only have their body left to sell. So we buy the corners, kidneys of the poor, make them surrogates for the kids we cannot give birth to, and we buy the women and children for our own sexual gratification. We buy access to the genital openings, to the anuses, the vaginas, and the mouth. Why? Because it's possible. because it's legal, answered 60% of more than 6,000 of the men in a large Danish study of Danish men's prostitution habits. Because it's casual sex, answers 36% of the men. But none of the Danish men in the study mentioned the violence, which is surprising when we know that the risk of violence is omnipresent in prostitution. If the reason why it's not mentioned is because none of the more than 6,000 are perpetrators, or if it is because it's even more taboo to be perpetrators of violence than it is to be prostitution buyers, is a question. We know that violence is a term in prostitution. In a Swedish study, more than 50% of women have experienced violence such as rape, sadistic treatment, and abuse. A Danish study showed that among women in the brothels, many of them have broken agreements and the boundaries were constantly crossed. Men who buy sex, who they buy and what they buy is the title of a recent British study. 50% of those men believed that the women were tricked, cheated or trafficked into prostitution. Nevertheless, it didn't hold them back from buying sex from women, which, for many of whom, could be called sex slaves. One of the most important things you can say about men who buy prostitution is that they buy the power to personally define what is sold and what it is they are buying. Both Danish men and women define men's right to purchase prostitution. For where else will he go with his need for sexual relief? Him, the man who had a hard time with women. Him, the fat one, the stupid one, the weird one, the odd guy, or the disabled man, or the man who is far away from home. For his sake, prostitution should be an option. Though a Danish study shows that 64% of Danish men who buy prostitution live in a relationship with a woman. So it may well be that he is fat, stupid, an outsider, disabled, and has difficulties with women. But we are all married to him. He's our husband or he's our boyfriend. What does it do to the relationship between men and women when the website like Hedomax exists? A website where men buy prostitution can review their purchase as if it were a pair of trainees or a mobile phone. In one example, a man says, "That was fucking great. Her, the tie hooker, had such a tight hole that I could not get my cock in without hurting her. It was fucking great. It can be recommended." Another man says, "Bad, I thought, as Annette opened the door. I could not get it up running in her company. She was too old. Her time in the industry was out." And the third adds, "Just visited Maya, and can I unfortunately not recommend that slut. She is not nearly as hot as in the pictures, does not smell good, and her morning was too fake to make the product a cool experience. Bad experience and a waste of money." Equality between women and men suffers as we accept prostitution as a normal behavior. It is unacceptable for all countries who call themselves the democracies of equality to accept men's sexual exploitation of women by accepting brothels, street prostitution, escort prostitution, and all other forms of prostitution. Unfortunately, Denmark is one of those countries where women are put for sale and purchased equally with other trade objects. For me, prostitution is mainly a cultural phenomenon, albeit rooted in social, economic, and structural problems. Though with a positive aspect, the cultural phenomenon may change over time. And here lies my hope for the future. With my many years of experience in social work, I do not see prostitution as a benefit for anyone or anything, but rather a disaster to the whole community. As long as mankind can be reduced to a commodity to be bought and sold, and as long as a country can accept that their women are a commodity, just as long will equality between women and men be a distant dream for the future.